Living with flatmates can be difficult, especially when it comes to shared spaces and respecting personal boundaries. One of the most frustrating situations I've encountered is having my food eaten without permission. It's annoying enough when it happens occasionally, but it becomes infuriating when the person doing it seems to feel entitled to what's mine. I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I share a rented house with a single mother who is 30 and her 6-year-old son. We originally had another flatmate, but they moved out, and she took their place. I didn't mind the new arrangement at all. I'm usually at work or spending time at my boyfriend's place, so we don't see each other much, and when we do, our interactions are generally pleasant. It felt like an easy, low-stress situation, and I was fine with the occasional chaos that comes from living with a child. However, over time, I noticed something strange. My food kept going missing from the fridge. I'd come home after a long day at work, looking forward to a meal I'd saved, only to find that part of it had been eaten, or worse, it was completely gone. At first, I assumed it was her son grabbing snacks without thinking, so I mentioned it to her, politely asking if she could stop him from eating my food. She agreed, and I didn't think much more about it at the time. It was an inconvenience, but not something I felt upset about initially. But then it kept happening. I'd get home, expecting to find leftovers waiting for me, only to discover the food had been picked through again. Each time, I felt a little more irritated, especially because I had already brought it up. I was starting to feel like my simple request to respect my space wasn't being taken seriously. When I mentioned it to her again, she seemed annoyed that I kept bringing it up, as if it was unreasonable for me to expect my own food to still be there when I needed it. As I became more observant, I realized something that gave me a potential solution. Neither she nor her son ever ate vegetables. Anything green or healthy-looking was left untouched, while more kid-friendly or indulgent foods like orange chicken or cheesy dishes would disappear. It was a small but clear pattern. With that in mind, I decided to test a simple strategy. If I incorporated vegetables into everything I cooked, it might deter them from eating my food. And honestly, I love vegetables, so it wasn't a sacrifice for me. I started adding vegetables to dishes where I normally wouldn't. For example, if I had mashed potatoes, I mixed in green beans. If I made cheesy bacon fries, I would cover them with broccoli. For me, these combinations were still tasty, and I knew they would serve as a deterrent for my flatmate and her son. One day, I made a large pot of mac and cheese, a dish I know her son loves. But this time, I added roasted Brussels sprouts. To me, it was a delicious combination, and I was happy to have the extra vegetables. My flatmate, however, wasn't pleased. She happened to be in the living room while I was cooking, and when she saw me get out the Brussels sprouts, she immediately asked, "What are you doing with that?" I could tell she was irritated. I simply told her I liked Brussels sprouts and was adding them to my food. She accused me of being greedy and annoying for doing that, which honestly felt unfair. I wasn't being greedy. I was just trying to make sure the food I prepared for myself would actually be there when I wanted it. She then said they needed food, as if that justified taking mine without asking. In response, I calmly suggested that if she was struggling to make her groceries last, she might try buying fewer prepackaged items and more ingredients she could cook with herself, since that would stretch her budget further. At that point, I could tell she thought I was being spiteful, as though this was some kind of passive-aggressive act of revenge. But the truth is, I just wanted to be able to eat the food I work for without worrying that it would be gone when I needed it. The issue isn't about sharing. I'm more than happy to share food, but the problem is the assumption that it's always available to them. If she had simply texted me and asked, "Hey, is it okay if we eat this?" I would have had the opportunity to say yes or at least prepare for it. Knowing ahead of time would allow me to stop for food on the way home or make other plans. Instead, I was often coming home after a long day only to find that the meal I had set aside was gone. On some mornings, I'd wake up in a rush, only to realize that the breakfast I had prepped was eaten, leaving me no time to cook something else before I had to leave for work. It wasn't a matter of pettiness. It was about setting clear boundaries and ensuring that I could rely on the food I bought and prepared for myself. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to skip meals or scramble for alternatives just because someone else didn't respect those boundaries. By putting vegetables in all my dishes, I was able to enjoy my meals while discouraging them from taking my food without asking. In the end, it was a win-win for me. I got to eat more vegetables and my food stayed safe. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what was mine and ensuring that my needs were met. When I get home, it feels like something is always up, and lately, I've been thinking a lot about how rude it is when someone eats the last of someone else's food without asking. If someone makes a big pot of something and you ask for a serving, that's fine. But if there's only one portion left and you take it without permission, that's incredibly selfish. I think it's downright rude, almost evil, to assume it's okay. In my situation, it seems like my roommate believes her child is entitled to my food. But that's not true. She needs to learn how to cook instead of acting like the food I make is up for grabs whenever she wants. Recently, I've been sticking to a routine of putting vegetables into everything I cook, even in dishes where I normally wouldn't. This has turned into a real source of tension between me and my roommate. She started calling me a jerk, but she won't actually admit that she's eating my food without asking. She just hovers nearby when I'm cooking, watching me with an annoyed expression, especially when I add vegetables like celery and bell peppers to dishes like lasagna. She gets so frustrated that she fumes silently, off to the side, but never says anything directly. There are certain foods where I can't easily sneak in vegetables, like snacks, chips, brownies, or cookies. But I've solved that by keeping them in Tupperware containers in my room, so they're not accessible to anyone else. This isn't really about the act of sharing food, though. Sharing isn't the issue here. I don't mind sharing when I'm asked directly. For example, the other day, her child knocked on my door and politely asked if he could have a bag of microwave popcorn, and I had no problem giving him one. That's how it should be, just ask first. What really bothers me is that my roommate never asks. She doesn't send a simple text like, "Hey, can I have some of this?" and wait for a response. She just helps herself without permission. It's the lack of communication and basic respect that gets under my skin. If she just asked, I might say yes. But her entitlement and assumption that she can take whatever she wants are incredibly frustrating. Despite this, I feel for her. It's obvious she struggles with cooking, and she has a hard time trying new foods. She's older than me, but she reacts like a child when it comes to eating anything healthy. The idea of biting into something green makes her wince, and sadly, this attitude is spreading to her kid. It's concerning, but it doesn't excuse her behavior when it comes to my food. A few days ago, I was in the kitchen making taco meat out of ground beef. As usual, my roommate was lingering nearby, watching me out of the corner of her eye, but pretending not to. The day before, I had made a dish with sautéed mushrooms and peppers, so when I went to grab the mushrooms from the fridge, she completely lost it. As soon as she saw them, she started yelling, "My son hates mushrooms." I calmly ignored her and added the mushrooms to the pan anyway, mixing them with the peppers. Her reaction was unlike anything I'd ever seen. She started stomping around the kitchen, yelling and slamming cabinet doors while her son just stood there, watching in silence. I felt bad for the kid, having to witness his mom throwing such a fit over something as trivial as mushrooms. Some people have suggested that she might tamper with my food, but I don't think she's the type to do something like that. If she did, I would report it right away. As out of control as her tantrum was, she never actually touched my food or knocked anything over. She just made a big scene, venting her frustration by opening and slamming cabinets. It was all very dramatic and honestly quite silly. At one point, she even threatened to get the authorities involved. I stayed calm and told her she needed to relax. It was clear that she was genuinely upset and stressed, so I tried to offer some advice. I told her I understood how hard it must be being a single mom, but that she needed to manage her government assistance more responsibly. She wastes so much of her money on convenience foods like cold mac and cheese, pre-made sushi, and rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. I suggested she check out food pantries and buy more affordable, versatile ingredients like potatoes that would last longer. She didn't appreciate my suggestion, though. Instead, she accused me of being condescending and pointed out that I always seem to have plenty of food, as if that somehow made her behavior okay. There's this idea floating around that I should just make extra portions for her and her kid, but it's not as simple as that. I don't make enough money to feed two other people on a regular basis. If it were an occasional thing, where she asked for leftovers every now and then, I might be okay with that. But this is a constant issue. It's not just about giving away food I wasn't planning to eat anyway. When I make a big pot of something, it's because I need that food to last me for a few days. If she eats it, I'm left without and it messes up my entire budget. Then I have to go shopping again, which wastes both my time and money. I really hope she doesn't go through with calling the police on me over something as ridiculous as adding vegetables to my own food. If I were in her shoes, I would have stopped and asked her directly, "Why does it matter if your son hates mushrooms? He's not the one eating this." I think I've been too passive about the whole situation, skirting around the real issue. Her food insecurity isn't my responsibility, but her stealing my food is a problem. Honestly, I think her son is just an excuse. He's smart enough to ask when he wants something, like with the popcorn. If he really wanted my food, he would ask. It's the mom who's helping herself to my food, and she wants it cooked to her preferences, without the vegetables that she doesn't like. Let me know what you think about this situation and how you would handle it. I'd love to hear other perspectives.